Hey, have you ever heard of Operation Dani? What about the Nakba? Today we're going to talk about the expulsion of 50 to 70,000 Palestinian Arabs from their homes in Lydda and Ramla, and the indiscriminate extermination of Palestinians at the hands of the Israeli forces. Lydda and Ramla were just under 2 miles or 3 kilometers apart, and were to be included in the areas designated as an Arab state under the terms of the UN Partition Plan of 1947. Now, I've seen sources list them as 5 kilometers apart as well, and I can only assume that the confusion is caused by the aftermath of the ethnic cleansing carried out there. Despite being assigned as an Arab area under the Partition Plan, David Ben-Gurion took advantage of the breaking of a truce in July of 1948 to expand the Israeli conquest of Arab territories. United Nations Resolution 181 was a plan to partition Palestine into zones giving Palestinians 42% of the land and Zionist settlers 56% of the land. The cities of Jerusalem and Bethlehem, as well as the adjoining areas, were to be an international zone. While Zionist colonizers were quick to accept the terms of the resolution, Palestinians were less excited about having their ancestral homeland partitioned and given away without their having any power or say in the matter. The proximity of Lydda and Ramla to Tel Aviv, the housing of a major airport, and the crossing of the nation's main north-to-south and east-to-west railways were of utmost importance to Israeli colonizers, and the partition plan hadn't really taken this into account. In addition, Lydda and Ramla also lie directly on the path in between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. During the era of the Balfour Declaration and Jewish migration away from Germany during the Holocaust, many Jewish migrants headed towards Palestine. The sudden influx of Zionist settlers began to cause greater and greater tension in Palestine. Now, Great Britain administered Palestine during the period between 1920 and 1947, and in 1947, Great Britain brought these growing issues before the United Nations. In response, on November 29, 1947, the UN adopted Resolution 181, which partitioned the land in the ways described earlier. It was at this time that the Arab-Israeli War began in earnest. The first truce in this conflict lasted from the 11th of June to the 8th of July, 1948, and on July 9th, 1948, Operation Dani, named after Palmach officer Daniel "Danny" Mass, began. Organized by Ben-Gurion and carried out under the direction of Yitzhak Rabin, its objective was to completely clear these selected areas of Arab populations and place the lands solely under Israeli control. On the morning of July 11th, leaflets were dropped from Israeli planes urging the people of Lydda to escape before Israeli forces began occupying the city. I was unable to find an exact time that these leaflets were dropped, but by noon, those Israeli forces had began their assault on the citizens of Lydda. After a struggle for the city, the superior weaponry wielded by the Israeli soldiers against the civilians in Lydda and the Arab Legion won out. By the evening, shots were being fired without regard for age or gender, something that still rings all too true today. While citizens of Lydda were breaking their fast during the holy month of Ramadan, Israeli bombs began raining down on the city, killing and wounding dozens of Palestinians. July 12th saw even more indiscriminate violence. Jordan sent a small reconnaissance force of armored vehicles, which bolstered the hopes of the Palestinian Arabs and led to a resurgence in fighting. The Jordanian forces were not coming to reinforce the Palestinians, however, and after their retreat and the killing of several Israeli soldiers by Palestinian resistance fighters, the severity and brutality in the taking of Lydda increased. Israeli soldiers patrolled the streets with loudspeakers, making claims that Palestinians that remained in their homes would be safe, only to have other Israeli soldiers follow behind them and claim to have knowledge of snipers in those homes before lobbing hand grenades inside. Terrified Palestinians would run from their homes and into the streets to be gunned down by Israeli soldiers waiting for them. Palestinians who had been forced to take shelter in the Damascus mosque were slaughtered. Palestinian bodies would lay in the street for 10 days. Estimates for those killed range from 100 to 426 people, but it should be noted that lower figures are often from explicitly pro-Israeli or Israeli sources. Estimates for those killed in the Damascus mosque alone are between 80 and 176 people. Also on July 12th, Yitzhak Rabin signed an expulsion order for the citizens of Lydda and Ramla, quote, without regard to age. On the 13th of July, the forced expulsion began. While some citizens of Ramla were bussed out of their homes, most citizens of Lydda and Ramla were forced to walk nearly 30 miles in the brutal summer heat to Ramallah. The Lydda Death March caused the deaths of dozens more Palestinian citizens, with estimates ranging as high as 500 people. Israeli soldiers refused to let Palestinians stop for supplies, including water, during the forced march, despite residents being given only 30 minutes notice to vacate. Israeli soldiers looted valuables from the living as readily as from corpses fallen by the side of the road. Between July 9th and July 18th, 32 Palestinian communities were overtaken and occupied by Israeli colonizers, displacing almost 82,000 Palestinians. This is what's known today as the Nakba. In Lydda and Ramla alone, between 50 and 70,000 people were displaced, accounting for 1/10 of the displacement of the Nakba. Israeli colonizers began occupying the empty homes of those expelled to prevent their reoccupation should their rightful occupants return. This practice of occupying forcibly emptied Palestinian homes continues until today. Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated on November 4th, 1995, by an Israeli ultranationalist who was opposed to Rabin's signing of the Oslo Accord, an interim peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. As always, there's so much more to say about all of this, but I encourage you all to check out the sources listed in the description below because, as always, this is just a snippet.